We have risen from the ashes to school the masses. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Scholars of Wrestling Show. I am your man behind the microphone, Scholar Jeff, your current reigning Scholars of Wrestling Party champion in the house. Also in the house, we do have, as always, the OG Undisputed Scholar himself. He is Scholar Tarek, but Scholar Tarek, you're looking a little bit less shiny these days. What the heck happened, sir?
Well, I called it last week. Scholar Charlie took advantage on a very predictable pay-per-view or a premium live event, whatever the hell it's called these days, and finally cashed in his briefcase. It was either this pay-per-view or the next pay-per-view because at that point he only had Money in the Bank left to essentially just cash in and be like, okay, here's your title match.
He pulled a
Pretty
Damian
much
Priest, wait until almost the very last minute.
he would have repeated last year. And it's like, Charlie, you had this beefcase all year. This is your last pay-per-view to make this a title match. It was basically a history was going to repeat itself moment here.
But thankfully for Charlie, he learned his lesson, and we do indeed have a new Scholars of Wrestling champion. Congratulations, Scholar Charlie.
Congratulations, Scarlet Charlie. You finally got rid of that beefcase. And now you have to worry about another undisputed scholar coming after you with Brian winning the number one contender triple threat between you three, him and Jeremy. But yeah, good luck whenever that you guys have that title match, whether it's the next pay-per-view or the third pay-per-view where he has to defend it.
Yeah, there's a lot in flux, but you know what? Now that there's no beefcase in play anymore, at least not for a little while, now we can fight for championship belts the way God intended, like men, without any distractions. So, with
Let's see.
that being said, oh, you're
Let's
looking up
see.
which the next one is?
It's like when is the next Money in the Bank? Because at that point I'll try and go for the beefcase. Let's see.
Oh, will you now?
Oh, of course. Let's see. The next one,
Hmm.
20, is July 6th. So,
Okay, just a couple months.
hmm at that point, whoever's not champion will go for that beefcase.
Oh boy, this one's gonna be interesting.
Oh, it absolutely will.
But before we get to that, we have had our fair share of other interesting developments this past week, along with a was probably one of the most lively and enthusiastic pay-per-view crowds of the year. But before we get to all that, we need to talk about the happenings behind the curtain in a little segment we like to call Backstage News.
Indeed. Let's go ahead, peek behind that curtain once again to check in on a little backstage
Backstage
news.
News.
News. Backstage news. Backstage
I'll
news.
I'll never
Back,
make
back,
an
back,
audio clip
back,
for
back, back,
that.
backstage news.
Meh.
No, only Brian. At this point, let's let Brian be the only one that goes meh. Let's
I
try
will
and have our own
continue tradition,
original.
damn it.
No, well, at this point, I'm going to try and just do something original. I'm not just trying to copy off my undisputed scholar tag team partner. That's why I say I'll just keep going. Backstage news. Backstage news.
Oh, please.
Backstage
It'll be
news.
episode 987 before we ever get to some sort of consensus about this. But
There'll never be.
speaking of consenses, whatever the plural of that is, a consensus was finally found for, of all things, the next year's WrestleMania. WrestleMania 41, it is official, will be coming to us from Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas.
Viva Las Vegas.
Tell me something. I can't remember if I ever asked you this. Have you ever been to Las Vegas, fool?
I have been to Las Vegas once in my early years, and I guess because it was in my early years, I could just say it'll be a new experience for me. But I'm definitely trying to definitely go to this one. I would love to go Vegas WrestleMania. And now that I actually just did the Viva Las Vegas, I will not be surprised if they actually use that as the WrestleMania theme song, at least one of the WrestleMania theme songs.
I'm sure it's going to pop up somewhere, but I'm just not quite sure where. I just am super excited about this in a very unique way. Not just this, obviously, this past year, me and my lovely wife were at WrestleMania 40 in Philly in our neck of the woods. And that was the atmosphere, and it was such a good time. And not to mention, the city of Philadelphia was such a great city for it. It was quite walkable. It was a lively city without being too much. There was so much to see and do all across the city, and that's just our neck of the woods. This kind of thing on the East Coast that we know. As soon as it was announced that it was going to be in Vegas, when I've been several times over the past decade, I'm just, especially where it's going to be in the relatively brand new Allegiant Stadium, right down the street from the Las Vegas Strip, with all those resorts, all those casinos, all those hotels. Oh, the atmosphere is going to be absolutely unreal for that entire weekend. It's going to be like nothing else on the planet. I I do not want to miss it, and for one, I'm going to make every single effort to make it there myself and my wife.
Oh, absolutely. Just yeah, it's definitely going to have that different type of atmosphere that's going to be completely different than Philadelphia. And considering that this one, uh, the fact that this plan to make it Vegas is relatively last minute. I know they were planning at least to have it. I believe they said like Minnesota or something.
Yeah, I
At least,
believe released a quote saying that this was due to a regime change or a change in
mhm.
management, which makes me, obviously we're talking about the change from Vince McMahon to Triple H, but I admit I was curious about this myself. What would be so different about that in particular where they would switch over from Minnesota to Las Vegas?
I believe it was something to do with the response of the WrestleMania press conference, aka that WrestleMania wrestling show without the wrestling. Like the big success of that press conference was actually one of the big leading factors that led them changing to the Move Mania to Vegas.
Hmm, that's fascinating. Either way, I of the two options, I was absolutely pulling for Vegas just because of how fun that place can be, just on its own. Let
Mhm.
alone just filling that entire Las Vegas Strip and Fremont Street full of wrestling stuff. Not to mention, there's going to be other wrestling shows. There's going to be WrestleCon, which is already phenomenal. This is, if anyone who's listening to this right now, that includes hosts, co-hosts, listeners, whatever. I think I speak for most of the people at the Scholars of Wrestling show. See, when I say that we are going to definitely take it seriously, we're going to try and make it there if at all possible. It's because this one, even sight unseen, this one is going to be a show to remember.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, before we move on from backstage news, something really small, but very actually rather quick was brought to my attention. It was brought to my attention that by the time this episode goes live, the Iron Claw, the movie, the biopic about the Von Erich family, is finally going to be arriving on Max on streaming services when this episode goes live. So if you're seeing this and you haven't seen the Iron Claw yet, go watch it. Just pause this video, pause this show, go back. Let's take a look at the Iron Claw, because this is one of those biopics that's going to be another one to remember. This is one that wrestling historians and wrestling historians in the making, like we forge here at the Scholars of Wrestling show, are going to need to all see together. So I'm sure we're going to be as soon as we all get the chance to watch it, I'm sure we're all going to be discussing it at great length soon.
Oh yeah, now that I know it's gonna be on Max, I'm gonna sit down and watch it because I just never had the free time to actually go to a theater and watch it myself. But now I can now watch it in the comfort of my own home. Oh, it's gonna be one of those experiences. The Gotta have a box of tissues at hand.
Yeah, it's going to be quite the experience. I'm probably going to take a look at it sometime tomorrow. I'm not sure if my wife is going to be interested in seeing something like that. But speaking of interest,
Say Zac
yeah,
Efron's in it. That'll convince her.
wait, who?
Say it's like uh Zac Efron.
Oh, is that you said that really quickly? Like, okay, like,
It's like
uh,
Zac Efron's in it. Chill. It's like, oh really? I want to see what he does in this movie. That'll convince her.
hey, could be. But elsewhere, that wasn't even when it comes to wrestling documentaries, another happening this week. We also had the conclusion of season 5 of the series Dark Side of the Ring. And this particular season, I know I'm always at the forefront of watching every single episode of the season as it comes out when it comes to this show, but this season was paced a little bit differently. Uh, I don't want to say they're scraping the bottom of the barrel, but they're going for a lot of the either less controversial or the much less well-known figures and stories of professional wrestling minus one, at least in this season. There were a lot of stories that were not quite as dark as some of the really notorious ones. There were more like mini biographies, like John Tenta, a figure that everyone seemed to like. Again, there was also the Sandman, who ran a little bit of trouble, but not quite as insane as some of the other previous seasons, like an XPW, like like an Onita or something, or New Jack or Nick Gage. Not quite that extreme.
Mhm.
So, but there were also more obscure ones, like oh boy, I don't suppose you've heard of the name Chris Colt.
I have not.
Yeah, I think he was definitely before our time. He was definitely a very obscure name, but the way his story is told, and the way he was so cutting edge in so many different ways, and just how, for whatever reason, he needed to fly under the radar, and the kind of things he pulled off at the time he pulled off, that was a really crazy story, but absolutely worth a look. They're all worth a look. But really, the one that I knew I had to see right from the get go was the final episode of the season, all about Black Saturday, which is probably the biggest and most momentous thing in wrestling history that we were not alive for. I don't think, or
No.
we were just flew right in under the radar and pretty uninitiated. This was when the the time when Vince McMahon started spying up all the territories and ultimately forging them all into what would now be known as the World Wrestling Federation, and which ultimately led to the creation of WCW. And really, this one was especially fascinating, even if you don't know the history of like who Ole Anderson is, and all these names you probably heard of, but never really knew the entire story and context. This one was especially fascinating, especially because they positioned the entire story as essentially the rise and fall of Vince McMahon. Like
Hmm.
even at the it starts off when Vince McMahon bought the Worldwide Wrestling Federation from his father Vince Sr., all the way to even when Vince McMahon gets ousted from the company. They even have little addendums to like, it's basically, if you ever expected a show like this to do the rise and fall of Vince McMahon without going in depth into the still fresh Janelle Grant allegations, this is I was expecting a bit of a history that I was not familiar with, but by the end of the series, by the end of the episode rather, I was the whole thing turned into the rise and fall of Vince McMahon. in a way that I've never seen before, and that just made it extremely compelling, extremely fascinating, and it was probably the best way they could have ended the entire season. Again, some more obscure things. It almost for most of the season it felt like they were sort of digging into the bottom of the barrel to find like more stories that maybe not be the most well known or the craziest, but were ultimately very human, including with the most historically significant one. So, much like all the others, this was another season full of stories that everyone who's a wrestling fan, everyone who is a scholar of wrestling, should absolutely check them out. Uh, cool. I can recommend some stuff to you later if you want. But
I
yeah,
guess the
these are definitely worth a watch.
I guess the Black Saturday is really the most intriguing one because I know that recently the people at Wrestle Talk actually released their pretty much their own version of that with the fall of the McMahons, just explaining the entire pretty much from that how you pointed and from Dark Side of the Ring, from when Vince took control from Vince Sr. to essentially when he left the company, and then when Stephanie and Shane left the company, to the point where there was basically no McMahon left in charge of WWF or WWE. And I guess just the real difference between when they had their documentary and Dark Side of the Ring is they have interviews with people who have experienced that. But am I correct with you seeing that episode?
Oh yeah, they pulled from a lot of people who I didn't even know were in those rooms, or like Jerry Briscoe. I knew
Hmm.
when we grew up, we just knew as one of Vince McMahon's stooges. This episode, for instance, explains why he was such a noteworthy figure and why he was Vince McMahon's stooge for so long.
Oh, of
Like
course.
stuff like that. Like it's stuff we don't know, but when you hear those names for so long, this explains why names like Ole Anderson were such a big deal and why like the Jim Cornettes of the world get all crazy about it when those people's names are mentioned. Like you really start to see what it was all about. I think that's what ever this entire season was about, pulling stories that you may not be immediately familiar with, but once the episode is over, you're like, oh, geez, what the heck did I miss out on with this person?
It would definitely be an interesting watch, like to watch both uh the Wrestle Talk one and the Dark Side of the Ring different views on the same subject, and one more detailed than the other one with people who actually were a part of that. So it'd just be very interesting to see the pros and con or the similarities and differences that they both went. And all I would really ask is, I wonder how Vince Sr. would react to see what Vince Jr. turned his business into, because it was made clear that Vince Sr. didn't want Vince Jr. to be involved with this, to be involved with professional wrestling. And once he left and once he passed, Vince Jr. was just like, all right, now that it's all mine, I can just take people from here, take people from here, and just let's yeah, end the territories in professional wrestling, and just see the conglomerate that it is today, and see what happened to Vince Jr. and how he was basically pushed out of what him and mostly what his father created.
Yeah, they sort of touch upon that in spots, not
Mhm.
giving too much away. There is some commentary and some other stories that come out in regards to that. But either way, absolutely worth a watch. If you haven't checked it out already, all of the episodes are all across the internet. You can find them. But yeah, another great season. And I hope they do another one very soon. Uh, I'm sure they'll come up with stories, at least I hope maybe the final story end of this whole Janelle Grant saga with Vince McMahon is gonna
Oh, that's
come to
gonna be a
some
Dark
sort of
Side of the Ring all
conclude.
on its own.
Oh yeah, for
Hell, I
sure.
can even
That
see that being their a two-parter.
easy, easy. But that is a conversation and a review for another day. For now, we have something else to review. That is WWE Backlash France. And I figured it was going to be lively of a crowd, but I was not expecting this because right now our our French friends are putting us to shame as fans because wow,
Uh,
what a loud crowd.
from all these premium live events that have been outside of the US, every single one of these crowds puts crowds to US to shame. The only ones that are actually in like similar level to those fans are the people in when they do it in New York, Philly, let's see. I would say Los Angeles, just basically the big wrestling cities. But when it's like like those smaller areas, smaller venues, oh yeah, that these premium live events, these crowds from France to Puerto to uh shit,
Puerto Rico?
where was yeah, Puerto
Last year's was in
Rico.
Puerto Rico, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, Backlash last year was in Puerto Rico. Um where was Clash of the Castle? Wales?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
Uh Pretty much the point. Yeah, they Australia. These crowds put most of the crowds in the States to shame. Complete and utter shame is to where you see all these memes where like the one specific one I saw is the picture of Kevin Owens having his face on the turnbuckle. It's just like the realization that the next WWE show is going to be in the US crowd after a spectacular France crowd, which yes, the one thing I will say, the people in France, they definitely made it clear they were very, very happy to see a WWE show. And it is really good to see WWE really put an emphasis on the first W for WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment.
Exactly. And that's something I was so excited to see, especially when the crowds are this good. I was I was like deciphering and hearing all all these French words I haven't heard since high school when I took high school French.
Hmm.
But it's just even just the crowd chants, like it just never stopped. Like honestly, the matches were good, but I feel like the crowd itself was the show. Uh, Oh man, that
Oh
it
yeah,
was such
the
a
crowd.
fun experience just on its own.
Oh yeah, the crowd definitely helped with that, and it helped the wrestlers keep their energy because you see the look on their faces. They were just like, "This is amazing," and I want to do my best to make sure this crowd gets to enjoy a great show, and it really was. It was a really great show. It wasn't a perfect show, but it definitely was a show that had a great atmosphere and just great energy that the wrestlers felt when they got that power from the crowd. And it was just a real fun time.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to remember. I was trying the entire most of the time whenever there was a two count, I was trying to figure out what the chant was. Like, oh, do something, something, do like only two. And then there was a whole thing, whatever the hell was going on with AJ Styles chant. Like,
Oh yeah, they were singing some phenomenal. I actually remember seeing a post about it, and it was just hilarious because I believe they were just pretty much just making having a song that has the word phenomenal in it and just put AJ Styles' name in it.
it wasn't even that. It was just like, either if it all mean la 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 la. I had to get the pacing down. Like I knew I needed to see it written out before I could really follow what the rhythm was. Like basically he is phenomenal. He is phenomenal. Like
Hmm.
Honestly, I feel like that is the most hype that a regular crowd has been for AJ Styles in a very long time. I was just happy to see him get that moment.
I was happy to see him get that moment and happy to see him put on really a great match. And that's something that can be really said with all of them, all the five matches really, is that all the matches felt important because and all the wrestlers felt important because the crowd made them important. Their response, they would think like this is a big deal. I mean, we were talking last week about Damian Priest and Jey Uso not feeling that big for the world title. Like it never got to that level. It's like we didn't feel like these are the top guys, but this crowd definitely made them feel like top guys. This crowd made everyone feel great. I mean, hell, the women's tag team match, weakest match on the card, there was a good few minutes where they basically completely was just trying to get back to form, but it didn't matter. The crowd were like it didn't take the crowd out of it. They were still going crazy for all that was going on. But yeah, it was just a fun show to watch. Great. I wish that like I get I would just go back to that one particular match at WrestleMania night one. Granted, I even said it was because you guys were basically sitting there in a giant like sitting in an ice box and you're
Oh
just
yeah.
basically bundled up trying like you couldn't express your energy because it was just so goddamn cold. And because of that, it hurt the tag match with Andrade and Ray versus Santos Escobar and Dom. It was a great match. It just the crowd wasn't in it because they were all just all of you guys were just bundled up trying to keep warm.
Which
So,
I as a sidebar, I'm not shocked at all that they ended up going for a closed roof stadium for for the next year.
oh, of
And
course. I feel like that's
they
now a
saw that
thing to make
cold,
sure.
yeah, they saw that cold weather from night one. They saw the reactions and were like, yeah, instead, yeah, let's go to the middle of the Nevada desert with a closed arena. That'll fix that right quick.
Exactly. And on
But
Easter weekend too.
yeah, that I can see being a bit of a point of contention, but I do have a little bit of a backup strategy in mind. I know a few things,
Hmm.
but
It's but yeah, it's just you could like you can have a great match, but when the crowd is the whole point when the crowd is not as energetic, no matter what the reasons, like it definitely takes away from what's going on in the ring, and you have the tag team match at Backlash, which again was the weakest match. It was very there were some spots that were just well sloppy, but it didn't matter. The crowd was loving every second of it. They loved the people that were in the ring, and every single one of them felt like stars, and it kept it going. And it definitely helped a viewing experience for me.
so all that being said, in terms of ratings, what kind of beard rating would you give Backlash France?
I probably would have given it a simple four, but because of that crowd, I'm gonna give it a four. I can't give it a perfect five, goat face, but I'll give it like a 4.5, like a nice, a nice long full beard.
I am going to second that. Although I'm going to say just a 4 out of 5 full beard. The matches themselves were serviceable, nothing outstanding, but that crowd turned it into a one of a kind experience and a great show all around. Took it up to the next level. 4 out of 5 full beard, absolutely. Very strong
Really,
show.
really good for essentially a filler pay-per-view. Because the only real significant change was the changing of the women's tag titles, and of
Hey,
course the changing of the Scholars title. But again, I saw that coming a mile away.
oh yeah, there's still plenty to enjoy. And just as soon as we're done with that, now we are built the build to the king and queen of the ring is already back off in earnest, though not with a few change ups. We just started off this past week's Monday Night Raw with a whole variety of roster changes and victories and some pretty sizable ones at that. We got, let's see, we got Jey Uso defeating uh, Finn Balor. We got, let's see, I'm going over it now. We got Io Sky defeating Natalia. That was an easy pick. But we also got Ilya Dragunov being inserted into the King of the Ring tournament and beating Ricochet. We also have Zoe Stark thrust back into the picture and beating Ivy Nile. Let's see. And we also have Lyra Valkyria showing up on Monday Night Raw, debuting on Monday Night Raw, I think, to defeat Dakota Kai to advance. And we also have another match between Gunther and Sheamus. And with Gunther being Sheamus to advance in the King of the Ring, no sleepers here. No sleepers here at all. This made for a very engaging night of wrestling as far as the Monday Night Raw is concerned.
The only thing that I'm now nervous about is because I don't want the King of the Ring to be involved when I don't like the insertion of Jey Uso, and now something that was announced today, Bobby Lashley is taken out in his match with Toma Tonga, and Angelo Dawkins is put in his place. I don't want the King of the Ring tournament to basically be a bloodline story. I want it to be its own separate thing. And just the idea of a potential final of Jey Uso versus Toma Tonga, I'm not for that. And this isn't just because of me wanting Gunther to win the whole thing. It's just I like the Bloodline storyline. I don't want the Bloodline storyline to basically take over everything that's going on with WWE storytelling. I want different stories. I want you have such an amazing roster, and to just keep throwing in the bloodline to try and make it more interesting, it just doesn't work for me. It just makes me it gives too much. It brings too much of the storyline. Don't force one of your big storylines in it, because yes, the bloodline storyline is the biggest story, but you don't need it to basically take over everything that's going
I,
on for the rest of the card.
I agree. Like, if it made more sense, at least in my mind at the time, why they had to do that with, say, Roman Reigns. But now, obviously, with Roman out of the picture and this whole dynamic shift in the bloodline, I will totally agree. And if it puts your mind at ease at all, I'm looking at the rest of the bracket right now. And just looking at everyone else who's in this thing outside of Tama Tonga, we in the SmackDown bracket alone, we also have LA Knight, we've got AJ Styles and Randy Orton. And on the other side of Raw, we still have Ilya Dragunov, Jey Uso, and Gunther. And not to mention, we also have Kofi Kingston and Rey Mysterio. Like, I'm sure Tama Tonga, I can see beating some of these guys, but not all of them. Like, especially the big names like Gunther. Like, I don't. I can see Tama Tonga beating some of these guys, but I do not see him beating everybody and ultimately going on to win the thing. I think something has got to give. Because if
I need to look at the SmackDown brackets because I know the names that are in it. I just don't know where they are on the brackets. Let's see.
uh yeah, Tama Tonga is all the way on the far end. Uh his next match would have to be the winner of Santos Escobar and LA Knight. Like, there's an outside chance of that. But then after that, if Tama Tonga does win, he would also have to defeat the victor of Baron Corbin and Carmelo Hayes. And AJ Styles and Randy Orton. Like that is a lot to get through. Like Corbin and Carmelo Hayes, yeah, he might be able to beat him, but the winner of AJ Styles and Randy Orton, I just don't see him beating everyone. And even if he does, he still has to deal with the winner of whoever's going to be between Gunther, Ilya Dragunov, Jey Uso, or Kofi Kingston or Rey Mysterio, which, let's be real, it's probably going to be Gunther.
All I know is I want the semifinals to be Dragunov versus Gunther.
Oh, it's, I'd be shocked if it wasn't.
Because
Like,
like it's like I said last week. Oh, sorry, or no, it's like what's that? I don't. I'm not that far like on board with Jey Uso's in the in the position. I At this point I just don't feel like he's at that point where I feel like, oh, he should be winning this, especially now that he was just basically inserted in because of Drew McIntyre's elbow injury. I just feel like at this point, this is something that will help. It's at that point he doesn't need it. I just don't think this is something that he needs. And in my opinion, I would want the finals to be either Gunther versus Orton or Gunther versus LA Knight.
I agree. I don't think that, and when I brought that up, I didn't mean to imply that I think Ilya Dragunov is actually going to win the thing. More so that like there's too many killers in this pool.
Hmm.
Like, like
That's what I love about this tournament is that because there's so many big names in this one, it definitely makes it feel more special. I mean, in my opinion, I think Kofi's going to beat Ray whenever they're going to have that, whichever house show that's going to be.
yeah, but even then, like I can't see, I wouldn't be, I can't not see Ray winning against Kofi either. This could go either way,
Oh,
and that's what
I'm
makes it
just now looking
wonderful.
at it through story purposes because of Gunther taking out Xavier Woods. Kof there is a story that's put in that, and that's something I want to see taken care of. And I just want Gunther to just
Kill
continue
everyone.
keep going and destroying the New Day.
Hey, I won't be mad at that. And honestly, right now, I think Gunther is probably my favorite to win. But until we get to that next chapter, anything else on this past Monday Night Raw? That really was this past Monday Night Raw, except for maybe a CM Punk promo. And that the adventures of CM Punk backstage at getting locked in at WWE headquarters. I think that was most of WWE Raw was the King of the Ring tournament.
Yeah, that's pretty much what this focus on this episode. Oh, oh, I'm gonna have to step away from the computer. I hear one of
Yeah,
the kids awake, so I'm gonna have to
absolutely.
check on
I'll
that.
all right. I'm gonna buy some time in the meantime. Yeah, as far as Monday Night Raw goes, this was the entire show actually was just King and Queen of the Ring matches, which I personally love. I've spoken at great length about this, where I love tournaments. I love matches with stakes that aren't just, oh, hey, this person versus that person on XYZ show. There's a time and a place for that. And if I had to editorialize for a moment, I'd say that that kind of match is what someplace like AEW does very well, where they can have such a deep roster of, let's say, exotic talents that you don't normally see as always being quote unquote WWE people. Meanwhile, WWE, they team, if there's no stakes, it seems, in my opinion at least, that you feel that. Where if there's nothing happening, it's just like, okay, here's another match on Monday Night Raw. It's Nia Jax versus Liv Morgan, part 32, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm sure some of you listening to this at home will get that vibe where WWE, at least in this point in time, at this point when this episode is being filmed, WWE tends to do storylines very well, especially in the Triple H era where they will actually follow up on such things. With AEW, you can absolutely have those standalone matches and have them mean something. From what we saw in in this new King of the Ring and Queen of the Ring tournament matches, this, in my opinion, gave a zest and flavor to the weekly wrestling shows that really has not been there in a very long time. And that's why that alone makes the King of the Ring, the King and Queen of the Ring tournament matches so special. And I think we got Tarek back on the line. Tarek, you there?
Yep. Yep, I'm right
And we're
here.
back. I have a successfully bought all the time. I'm a good boy.
Yep. Yep, I had to little guy woke up Logan woke up asking for water, so I had to take care of it.
Gotta do
Parental
daddy mode,
parent
of course.
Of course. Got to take care of the little guy.
Naturally. And of course, with that being said, with a little bit of a digression on how who does which kinds of matches, we also had a pretty sizable AEW Dynamite and another big match announced for Double or Nothing. We have the Elite versus FTR and their new tag team partners, Eddie Kingston and Brian Danielson. Team AEW versus Team Elite, set for Double or Nothing. I'll tell you what, there was a lot of shock about seeing Brian Danielson back in action that soon, and count me among that number. Like, although I have seen a bunch of criticism about like the timing of this particular match, I've got my opinion. But what do you think about the speed in which this match was set for Double or Nothing?
Well, oh, my immediate response to this was in a storyline perspective. You're like when with all the people that Kenny Omega and Tony Khan chose for their team AEW, you're gonna give it to the people that won. The Young Bucks beat with FTR, and one they had Okada beat with Eddie Kingston, and then you had the person who lost to Will Ospreay with Danielson who having that basically uh seizure. So I'm just looking, I'm like, yeah, name wise, it makes perfect sense. But if you look at this storyline wise, you're just like, oh man, you're basically throwing the guys that these people already beat to defend AEW. So I'm just like, I'm just thinking, what kind of thought in this other than just name power, which granted, it'll help sell the pay-per-view, but you have this storyline like these guys beat all these people already. So what is I'm looking at all of this. I was like, obviously, if you're the story progression wise and prediction wise, I'm obviously gonna keep going with Team Elite. And I'm just going thinking, I'm like, gee, who's gonna be the one that eat the pin on Team AEW? And I feel like I pretty much ruined. It's like, oh man, I kind of just ruined this because I'm just like, the Elite versus the losers. But
I
also it's like
couldn't.
I like this. I It's like it's two things. Yes, you have the good names, and then also it's like yeah, storyline wise, it really doesn't make sense to choose people like why don't you have like someone like a Will Ospreay who's obviously he can't do it because he's going for the international title, but you have like your John Moxleys and all that. You have people who are like in a way have momentum and when you want them to represent AEW as people's like who have that momentum. But again, that's just storyline perspective. That's like I'm thinking kayfabe wise, but names wise, it makes perfect sense to me. There's two sides of the coin for me.
The one thing that sort of like helps me to not take that too far is, first of all, there is a little bit of a history there. There is like a grudge, like a payback, especially like Eddie Kingston against Okada. Like that's there's still that fresh wound that they can easily tap into. Say, "Hey partner, I will go kick your ass." Well, AEW got rah rah rah. Brian Danielson, yeah, I admit that's a bit of a stretch. But in regards to the other names, that both Will Ospreay and uh, John Moxley, not only are they both members of other factions technically, but in the case of John Moxley, he's also the IWGP champion. So you could make that case that where either A, he's already got he's already busy with other matches, or B, that really they can always bring him in later if they extend this feud. Like, okay,
Oh, it's obviously going to extend this feud. It's very clear. That's
yeah. And
the
same thing with Will Ospreay, just to complete my thought. He's sort of like part of the Don Callis family, but not quite. When in all reality, there's gonna be that feud to wrap up first before he's basically, in my mind, this will make sense, hopefully in a minute. But I almost see Will Ospreay as almost like the Gunther of AEW in the sense where he can put on extremely good matches with so many different people. He's oftentimes match of the night. He's a big deal, but they don't need to put him right in the main event right away. Where whenever they're ready, there's always like WWE will always have Gunther ready to go whenever the time is right. In a similar way, I think AEW will have Will Ospreay waiting in the wings whenever they want to have that big match, which when it comes to Osprey, I think we know when that match is going
mhm. And the other else speaking with that being said, it's the inevitability of Will Ospreay. I guess the one thing that we've talked about in the past of where he's gonna be going, like how his journey is gonna be, basically how I feel like the top baby face. Um, and it's now looking like I don't think they're gonna have basically them repeat what happened this past week on Dynamite when the Embassy turned their back on Swerve Strickland.
to be. Yeah, I don't think
I feel
it's
like
going
it's
to be
gonna be
quite like
the
that.
I think he's basically gonna leave on his own accord. He's probably gonna be the one to punch Don Callis in the face to get himself. It's gonna be at that point he's basically gonna take himself out of the group instead of the group taking him out, as what Embassy did to Swerve Strickland this past week.
Mm.
Which it's disappointing to see that. I mean, it's not that surprising considering what happened to Swerve last week and like he got jumped by the patriarchy and no one came to help him. So it just makes sense. It's like, oh, I got my buddies who were not here last week who didn't have my back last week to turn on me. It makes perfect sense now. Uh, and
Checks
the
out.
uh, um, it's just leading to the inevitable uh Swerve Strickland versus Adam Page match that we've talked about on the show before, where I'm convinced, yeah, Adam Page is going to be joining the elite and being the world. Ooh, there's a sticker on my being the world champion for the elite, which will inevitably lead and my fantasy booking lead to Will Ospreay winning the title off Adam Page. But that's a few that's fantasy booking. Um,
Honestly, at the rate they're going, I just want to see Will Osprey take on the world. He's really been impressing the hell out of me lately.
he's definitely been missed these last couple of weeks where he wasn't. Which, yeah, he has an international title match at Double or Nothing, and you haven't seen either him or Roderick Strong on Dynamite. So he's just going, where is he?
I think we're gonna see a lot more of them in the next couple weeks.
Oh,
How
of
could they
course. With
not?
does when's Double or Nothing again?
Double
Like
or Nothing is I believe the last Sunday of May.
let's see, Double or Nothing. Yeah, May 26th. You're right.
Yep.
Wow, that
I know I'm
close.
gonna be,
Shit.
yeah, I know. I know it's gonna be Memorial Day weekend. I know I'm gonna be hosting some friends, including yourself, over for barbecues early that afternoon.
Put
So
that
that
party title on the line.
the party title will indeed be on the line for the first time a number of months.
I think it's the
We're
first time
due.
since January. That's it, since Royal Rumble.
Yep, we're finally gonna have another watch party going on, and there will be a title defense, or the party championship is gonna be up for grabs. Absolutely.
Scholars of Wrestling title defense, that's up to Charlie.
Well,
Knowing him, he probably won't do it.
we can always resort to the tried and true method of peer pressure to talk him into it.
He won't do it. No, it's like
You
knowing
you
how
won't do it. You won't do it, Charlie. You won't do it.
he knows he won't do it. When it comes to he'll save his title match for a WWE show because that's more his he's more a
Or
WWE
will
guy than
he?
AEW. No,
Or will he? Yeah, probably.
yeah, he will. We know Charlie. It's inevitable when
Oh
he faces
boy.
Brian, but we know it's going to be at a WWE show.
Yes, fair enough. But you know what? Much like AEW and WWE, that story too will continue on in the very near future. But that is this week in professional wrestling. The results, the good, the bad, and everything in between. So now is the point of the show where we turn it over to you, our fellow fans. What did you think of WWE Backlash? What did you think of Dark Side of the Ring season 5? Will you be watching the Iron Claw? If have you seen already, and if so, will you see it again? No matter what you think, let us know all across the internet. Facebook comments, YouTube posts, Instagrams, whatever. Of course, as always, you can join the conversation on X slash Twitter slash whatever the hell you want to call it. They want to join the conversation with you, fool. Where can they reach you?
You can reach me at the Avatar.
And you can reach me at I'm Robbie Rage. Probably gonna be crying my eyes out to the Iron Claw.
Oh,
But
definitely.
that is a conversation for another time. And you know we're gonna be talking about all of it because you know who we are. We are the Scholars of Wrestling, and you have just been schooled. You're
You're
welcome.
welcome.
See you all next week for another World of Wrestling action.